March the 26th, 2007, Ichikawa, Japan. Early morning. He was gone. The apartment was quiet, too quiet. In the corner, a bathtub, filled with sand. Her body was inside. She was naked, bound, bruised, hidden like garbage. Outside, sirens pierced the calm, but it was already too late. He had escaped, barefoot, fast, silent. Police watched in horror. He vanished into Tokyo's streets. He didn't just disappear, he erased himself. He cut his own face, sliced it open with scissors, changed everything. Eyes, nose, jaw. He lived in shadows, worked on construction sites, slept on rooftops, and as police searched, he watched. He even wrote a book about running from them. How do you catch a man with no face? Why did no one stop him before she died? How many other women were close to becoming his victim? This is a true story. You can verify every word. Subscribe to @Unbelievable True Story. Because monsters don't live in movies. They live next door. And the next story might be about someone just like you. It was a normal Monday in Chiba Prefecture, Japan. Spring was blooming. People rushed to work. The city buzzed like usual. But inside room 705 of an apartment building in Ichikawa City, something was very wrong. Lindsay Ann Hawker was missing. She was 22, a bright, kind English teacher from the UK. She'd come to Japan full of hope, ready to teach, explore, and grow. But now, no one could reach her. Her parents were panicking back home in England. Her friends hadn't seen her in days. Her boss at the Nova Language School had reported her absence. That's when police were sent to the apartment. A small, quiet building, clean, peaceful. Nothing looked wrong until they knocked on the door. No one answered, but something made them suspicious. So they entered. They found something that would haunt them forever. A sand-filled bathtub, on the balcony, and inside it, Lindsay. Her body was curled, cold, wrapped in a towel. Her hands were bound. Her neck was bruised. Someone had hidden her like trash. She had been dead for days. The room was quiet but heavy, like the air itself knew what happened. Then came a shock. As officers looked around, someone moved. A man, barefoot, shirtless. He bolted. They tried to grab him, but he slipped away. Fast, agile, like he knew every step. He ran down the stairs. He didn't take the elevator. He was gone in seconds. That man was Tatsuya Ichihashi. Who was he? At first glance, Tatsuya looked like a quiet, normal man. He was 28, lived alone, kept to himself. But soon, the truth began to unfold. He wasn't just shy. He was obsessed. Obsessed with control, with dominance, with Lindsay. He'd met her just a few days earlier. Not at a club, not online, but in public. He followed her home. He waited outside her apartment. She thought he was a student. He said he wanted English lessons. He seemed polite. She agreed to one private session at a cafe. That was her first mistake. The day of the lesson, March 25, 2007, Lindsay texted her boyfriend. She said she was with a new student. Everything seemed okay. But hours later, she never came home. That's when the terror began. Police worked fast. They searched Ichihashi's apartment in detail. What they found shocked them. Hair, blood, duct tape, marks on the floor, signs of a struggle. He had tortured her. Then he buried her. Inside his own home. They found books on anatomy, magazines about escape. This wasn't an accident. It was a plan. But Ichihashi was gone, and the search began. For 2 years and 7 months, he vanished. He had no ID, no phone, no credit cards. Police released his photo. His face was on every TV, every newspaper. But nothing worked, because he didn't look like that anymore. Ichihashi did something almost no other fugitive has ever done. He changed his own face. He used knives, razors, ice. He cut his nose, flattened his chin, stretched his eyes. He removed 2 moles from his cheek. Later, he even paid for surgeries. using cash from day labor jobs. He worked on construction sites. He lived in shelters. He slept in parks and on top of buildings. He trained his body. He made himself smaller, leaner, unrecognizable. But one mistake changed everything. In November 2009, a staff member at a plastic surgery clinic in Osaka grew suspicious. A man had come in, asking for drastic changes to his face. Again, he looked familiar, too familiar. After the man left, the staff checked the police site. They called the authorities. The trap was set. 3 days later, at a ferry terminal in Osaka, police spotted him. They approached slowly. He didn't run this time. He knew. He gave a fake name, but inside his bag was a book, a Japanese-English dictionary. Inside it, his real passport. It was over, but the nightmare wasn't, because what came next was stranger still. Ichihashi confessed, not in court, but in a book. He wrote a full-length memoir while in prison. It was called Until the Arrest. Inside, he described it all, how he killed Lindsay, how he ran, how he cut himself, how he survived. He described the moment he knew she was dead. He said he panicked, that he didn't mean to kill her. He claimed remorse, but also pride. He talked about his surgeries like trophies, talked about evading police like a game. The book sold thousands of copies. Some were disgusted, others were fascinated. But Lindsay's family, they were devastated. The trial was set for July 2011. It had been over 4 years since Lindsay's death. 4 years of grief, silence, anger. Her parents, Bill and Julia Hawker, flew to Japan. They sat in the courtroom, just feet away from the man who took their daughter. Tatsuya Ichihashi entered quietly. He wore a plain suit. His hair was neat, his face rebuilt, but nothing could hide what he had done. As the trial began, the details came out. One by one, they revealed the truth behind the mask. On March 25, 2007, Lindsay met Ichihashi for a private English lesson. They met at a cafe where security footage later showed them sitting together. After the lesson, he offered to pay her back for a taxi she'd taken days earlier. She agreed to follow him home to get the money. She texted her boyfriend once they arrived at his apartment. It was the last time anyone heard from her. Inside the apartment, something shifted. Police believed Ichihashi attacked her almost immediately. He tied her up, assaulted her. Then, over the next several hours, he beat her. She begged for her life. She tried to escape, but he was too strong. Eventually, he strangled her. Then, he placed her body in a bathtub. He filled it with sand to muffle the smell. And, all the while, he stayed in the apartment. He slept near her body. He ordered food. He pretended nothing had happened. In court, the prosecution painted him as cold and calculated. A predator. They described how he avoided detection, how he planned his escape, how he studied anatomy, possibly to better hide her remains. They showed photos of the sand-filled tub, of the bruises, the bindings, the horror. Ichihashi, for his part, showed little emotion. He admitted to causing her death, but he denied premeditation. He said he panicked, that he didn't intend to kill her, that it just happened. But no one believed him. The court deliberated. The judges listened to over 40 witnesses. They reviewed every piece of evidence, every report, every photo, and, in the end, they sentenced him to life in prison. The Hawker family wept, not with joy, but with exhaustion. Bill Hawker said, "We've waited 4 long years for this. We will never be whole again." They had traveled across the world to see justice done, but even with the sentence, their pain wasn't gone. Their daughter was still gone, their lives shattered. Midway through this emotional courtroom journey, let's pause for a moment. This is a real story. Every fact you hear is public. You can check it yourself. If real-life mysteries leave you breathless, Subscribe now to @UnbelievableTrueStory, because the next truth we uncover might hit even closer to home. After the sentencing, Ichihashi was sent to Himeji Prison, a high-security facility in western Japan. He would live the rest of his life in a small cell. No more surgeries, no more hiding, just 4 walls and silence. But the story didn't fade. His memoir, Until the Arrest, was still out there. People were reading it. Critics were divided. Some saw it as a rare look into the mind of a killer on the run. Others called it disgraceful, exploitative. But in Japan, there's no law preventing convicted criminals from publishing books. So it stayed on the shelves. The money from the sales. Ichihashi claimed he donated all proceeds to Lindsay's family. But the hawkers didn't want his money. They wanted justice and peace. For many in Japan and the UK, this case became a symbol of how evil can wear a calm face, how danger can appear polite, clean, even charming. Ichihashi was well-educated, from a wealthy family. His father was a doctor. His background gave no hints of violence, but behind closed doors, he was capable of horror. The public asked questions. How did no one see this coming? How could someone live in plain sight without being caught for years? What about the other women he may have followed? Because the truth is, Lindsay wasn't the first woman he had stalked. Reports emerged of other female teachers who had uncomfortable encounters with him. He had approached them in cafes, followed them after work, even loitered near language schools, but no one had reported him. Nothing had ever escalated until it was too late. Police later admitted they had been close, multiple times. During the manhunt, they had followed false leads, searched dozens of apartments, talked to hundreds of people. But Ichihashi stayed one step ahead. Changing jobs, changing names, changing faces, he used fake IDs, bought prepaid phones, traveled by foot, slept in abandoned buildings. At one point, he even boarded a ferry to Okinawa, far from Tokyo. There, he worked on a construction site under a false name. He told no one about his past, just said he was starting fresh. They believed him. Why wouldn't they? He didn't look like a killer, but he was. This is not fiction. Every detail is part of a real case that you can verify yourself. And it doesn't end here, because even today, the case still haunts people, especially in the foreign teaching community in Japan. It forced language schools to rethink safety, to review policies on student-teacher meetings. It made female teachers more cautious, more alert, because Lindsay had done everything right. She had been polite, professional, cautious, but evil still found her. Even now, years later, the story of Tatsuya Ichihashi echoes through Japan. His face, once plastered across wanted posters, has become a symbol of betrayal. He was the quiet man next door, the kind who bows, smiles, listens. But beneath that soft exterior was a mind capable of terror. And for the Hawker family, the pain never truly ends. Bill and Julia Hawker returned to the UK after the trial. They brought home a sentence, but not their daughter. They had fought for 4 years, searched the streets of Japan, faced a nation, faced the killer, and now there was only the silence left behind. They launched a foundation in Lindsay's memory, hoping to help others avoid the same fate. They gave talks about travel safety, worked with embassies, warned young teachers abroad to trust their instincts. Bill once said, if Lindsay had run, if she'd screamed, maybe she'd still be here. But she was kind. She wanted to help him. That was who she was. In Japan, the media slowly moved on. But every so often, Ichihashi's name would reappear. A new article, a new documentary, a public debate about criminals profiting from fame. People wondered, why did he write that book? Was it guilt, or just another way to control the story? His words were cold, precise. He described each day on the run, each time he cut into his own skin, each time he sat in silence, hiding. Not once did he describe remorse, only fear of capture. And then there's the surgery, the chilling fact that he paid to erase himself. Multiple times he went under the knife, alone. No anesthesia, just scalpels, ice, mirrors. He changed his nose, his jaw, his eyelids. He even gave himself a new mole. This wasn't desperation, it was obsession. He wanted to vanish. In one of the most haunting passages in his memoir, Ichihashi wrote, "I could not forget her face. I saw her in mirrors, in strangers. I wanted to erase myself, but I couldn't erase her." That line, it haunted readers, but it didn't bring peace, because it was too little, too late. What about the investigation? Some still criticize how slowly it moved. The police waited days to issue a full warrant. They had him in their hands, on the night of the murder. And yet, he got away. That single moment, when Ichihashi slipped out barefoot and ran, it changed everything, because he could have been stopped. There were 8 officers at his apartment, 8 trained professionals, but he sprinted down the stairs, jumped a fence, and disappeared. No backup, no pursuit, just disbelief. After his escape, the police launched one of the largest manhunts in Japanese history. Over 15,000 tips were reviewed. More than 300 locations were searched. He had become a ghost. He lived on construction sites, in internet cafes, under bridges. Sometimes he read manga. Other times he watched Lindsay's case on TV. Once a coworker even recognized him, but didn't report it. How could this happen? Some say Japan's system simply wasn't ready. They weren't used to fugitives who changed their faces, or who vanished without using credit cards, phones, or known identities. Ichihashi studied escape. He read survival guides. He even avoided canned food, fearing the smell might give him away. This was a man who planned every breath, every movement. But eventually, time caught up. His new face didn't protect him forever. A plastic surgeon, suspicious of his repeat visits, notified the police. They matched his face to the old photos using bone structure scans. And on November 10, 2009, he was arrested at Osaka Ferry Terminal. The manhunt was over, but the scars he left would never fade. This is not fiction. Every detail is part of a real case that you can verify yourself. And there's more. Because Ichihashi's capture raised new questions. Uncomfortable ones. How many others like him are out there? How many killers look like anyone else? It forced Japan and the world to ask, are we too quick to trust a friendly face? Because the truth is, Lindsay never stood a chance. She was kind, hopeful, doing her job, and for that she was targeted. At her funeral, a friend read a poem she had once shared. It ended with, "I came to teach, to learn, to love, and now I leave, with silence in my place." Those words stayed with everyone in the chapel that day. Even now, they echo. Japan passed new guidelines after the case. Language schools were told to set safety protocols. Never let teachers meet students alone in private residences. Always keep lesson logs. Verify students' backgrounds. Some schools began installing panic buttons. Others trained staff in basic self-defense. Change came. But it was too late for Lindsay. In England, her story is still told in classrooms. Not as a horror story, but as a reminder of caution, of bravery, of the daughter who trusted one wrong person and paid the price. And Ichihashi? He sits in a cell. He has no internet, no visitors except his lawyer, no mirrors, just silence. Some say he keeps a photo of her in his cell. Others say that's a lie. The truth is, no one really knows, because monsters rarely reveal their full face, even after they've cut it apart. Inside the cold gray walls of Chiba Prison, Tatsuya Ichihashi now spends his days in silence. His cell is small, bare, sterile. He wakes early, follows orders, eats meals in silence. He rarely speaks, And when he does, it's short, quiet, controlled. He reads books, writes in a notebook, stares at the wall. But no one knows what he's thinking. No one knows if he feels guilt, or if he simply regrets being caught. Because Tatsuya Ichihashi never apologized. Not really, not in court, not to Lindsay's parents, not in his book. He offered explanations, descriptions, but not sorrow, not remorse. In his memoir, titled Until I Was Arrested, Ichihashi claimed he didn't intend to kill Lindsay. He said, "I only wanted to stop her from screaming. I didn't want her to die." But that statement didn't comfort anyone, because her injuries told a different story. Lindsay fought back. There were signs of restraint, blunt force trauma, evidence of prolonged assault. Experts said she likely suffered before her death, and he left her buried in a garden of dirt, as if her life meant nothing. At his trial, the court rejected his claims of accidental death. The judges called it what it was: premeditated, cruel, calculated. He was sentenced to life imprisonment with the possibility of parole after 20 years. Many in Japan felt that wasn't enough. They wanted no parole, no freedom, just justice. And for Lindsay's family, the pain didn't end with the sentence, because every year on March 25th, they relive it, the day they lost their daughter, the girl who dreamed of Japan, who studied hard, who traveled across the world to teach children, and never came home. They lit candles, planted flowers, built a scholarship in her name, but nothing can replace her voice, her laughter, her life. This is a real story. Every fact you hear is public. You can check it yourself. If real-life mysteries leave you breathless, subscribe now to @Unbelievable True Story, because the next truth we uncover might hit even closer to home. As the years passed, people kept asking, how did he do it? How did Tatsuya Ichihashi stay hidden for 2 years and 7 months in a country as tightly surveilled as Japan? The truth is, he lived like a ghost. He picked jobs that paid in cash, usually in construction. He slept in parks, abandoned buildings. He grew his hair out, wore masks, avoided cameras. He starved himself. Sometimes he'd eat once a day. His goal wasn't to live, it was to disappear. The plastic surgeries were perhaps the most shocking part. He saved up money from labor jobs. He studied anatomy books. And then, in secret, he began cutting his own face. First, small changes, then deeper ones. He even attempted to remove a distinctive mole himself before finally visiting clinics to correct the damage. One clinic performed multiple procedures on him. They changed the shape of his nose, altered his jawline, lifted his eyelids. He told them he was being stalked. He paid in cash, never used the same name twice. But despite his efforts, his paranoia grew. He once spent an entire night washing his clothes in a river because he thought they had fingerprints on them. He refused to speak to strangers. Sometimes he'd write questions on paper and slide them across counters in convenience stores, just to avoid speaking. His fear was constant, but it wasn't guilt, it was capture. The manhunt became part of Japanese history. Police posted 3D reconstructions of what Ichihashi might look like with different surgeries. They offered a 10 million yen reward, the largest in a Japanese criminal case at the time. Tips poured in. At one point, a man matching his description was spotted in Okinawa. Police raided an apartment, but it was another dead end. Each failure frustrated the public. Lindsay's parents pleaded in press conferences. "Someone knows where he is. Please, come forward. Help us bring our daughter peace." Finally, a doctor in Osaka saw through the disguise. He had performed 2 surgeries on Ichihashi and noticed his behavior was strange. Avoiding eye contact, always in a rush, insisting on no records. He called the police. They compared the new surgical results with old forensic models. It was a match. On November 10th, 2009, Ichihashi arrived at a ferry terminal in Osaka. He was boarding a ship headed for Okinawa. likely to disappear again. But police were waiting. They arrested him without incident. No chase, no fight, just quiet surrender. He said nothing. After his arrest, the details shocked the country. The tools he used, the hiding spots, the years of silence. Japan, a nation known for safety and order, had been fooled by one man for almost 3 years. A man who changed his face, but not who he was inside. When asked later why he ran, he said, "I couldn't turn myself in. I was afraid of losing everything." But he had already taken everything from the Hawkers, their daughter, their peace, their future. In one final interview, Lindsay's mother said, "We came to Japan looking for answers. We found pain, yes, but we also found kindness. So many people helped us, strangers, friends, reporters. This tragedy didn't define who Japan is. One man did this, not a country." But still, the shadows remain. In classrooms across Japan, new teachers are trained to stay cautious, to trust their instincts, to never enter private residences alone. Every March, they remember her. They light a candle. They speak her name. They promise not to forget, because monsters don't always wear fangs or claws. Sometimes they smile, they bow, and they knock on your door asking for help. The trial of Tatsuya Ichihashi was one of Japan's most closely watched court cases in recent history. Every day, people lined up outside the courthouse hours before the doors opened, hoping for a seat inside. Inside, Lindsay's parents sat quietly, stoic, heartbroken. They had flown halfway across the world again, not to see justice served, but to see the man who took their daughter's life look them in the eyes. But he never did. Ichihashi kept his head low, rarely looked up, rarely spoke. Even when given the chance to apologize, he didn't. Instead, he wrote long explanations, talked about his fear, his regret for running, but not for killing, not for burying her, not for robbing the world of Lindsay Ann Hawker. The prosecutors were firm. They argued that Ichihashi lured Lindsay into his apartment with clear intent, that he trapped her, assaulted her, murdered her, then spent hours covering it up, buying soil and plants, hiding her in a bathtub and escaping into the shadows. They showed photos, text messages, surveillance footage. They played her last known voicemail. The courtroom fell silent. Some jurors cried. Reporters held their breath. Even now, years later, those who were there say it was one of the most emotional trials they had ever witnessed. Ichihashi's defense team tried to argue for a lesser charge, manslaughter. They said he panicked, that it wasn't premeditated. But the evidence told a different story. There were signs of struggle, defensive wounds, ligature marks, and the fact that he ran for 947 days? It didn't help his case. The judge ruled this was not an accident. It was intentional, brutal, calculated. The defendant showed a complete lack of humanity. He was sentenced to life in prison, with the possibility of parole only after 20 years. But for Lindsay's family, no sentence could be enough. They lost everything: their daughter, her dreams, her future. This is not fiction. Every detail is part of a real case that you can verify yourself. In the years that followed, Ichihashi tried to justify his actions through writing. He released a book, a memoir of sorts, titled Until I Was Arrested. It described his life on the run, the surgeries, the fear, the lies. He described how he used tools from a hardware store to cut off pieces of his own face. He detailed how he practiced jogging at night with his mouth closed, so he wouldn't draw attention. He confessed to eating only bananas for weeks to survive. He claimed the memory of Lindsay haunted him. But again, he didn't apologize. The book became controversial. Some believed it was an attempt at redemption. Others called it exploitation. Lindsay's parents were appalled. They called it a disgrace, a twisted attempt to paint himself as the victim. Eventually, the publisher agreed to donate any profits to a memorial fund in Lindsay's name. But the pain remained. The book couldn't explain away the truth, that he had made a choice to harm, to kill, to bury a bright young woman beneath a bed of dirt. And yet, there's one haunting part of the story that still lingers. How many people saw Ichihashi during those 2 years and did nothing? Doctors, cashiers, landlords. He slipped through the cracks. Japan's justice system, even with its meticulous nature, was fooled. More than once. It raised uncomfortable questions. How safe are we, really? How easy is it to disappear? Could someone like this be living near you? Right now? What would you do in that moment? Would you have seen the warning signs? Could you have helped stop it? Lindsay Ann Hawker's story became more than a crime. It became a wake-up call, for safety, for awareness, for change. Her parents continued to speak out. They visited schools, spoke to teachers, advocated for stricter policies around private tutoring and foreign workers' safety. They didn't want another family to feel this pain. In 2021, on the 14th anniversary of Lindsay's death, her father stood at a memorial in England. He held a framed photo of his daughter, and he said, "We remember her not for how she died, but for how she lived. She was bright, brave, full of hope, and we will never stop speaking her name." And today, Tatsuya Ichihashi remains in prison. No parole, no freedom, just silence. He's middle-aged now, his face changed by surgeries and time, but the face he can't escape is hers, the one he saw the day he took her life, and every time someone searches his name, they see hers beside it, forever linked, a haunting reminder that no matter how far you run, truth always catches up. Have you heard this story before? Do you think justice was truly served? What would you have done if you were one of the people who met him while he was hiding? If you're drawn to real stories that stay with you, subscribe now to @UnbelievableTrueStory. Because every week we reveal the darkest truths hidden in plain sight. Watch the next video on your screen, or dive into our full playlist of real mysteries and crimes. The next story might be even more shocking.